units per deal. Red Mango's the same way. We sold about 2.5 units per agreement, so it was $3,300 per unit, but about $6,000 with that aspect. And what brought that down was a lot of the referrals. So if you look at 27% with referrals, I have a big part of my budget was in PR. And I mean, daily I was with Monica and her team on phone calls at BizCom. A huge, huge piece of our pie. So whether they directly said that they read about us or they called us and then they started Googling us, and when you Googled us, you could just see pages and pages on the brand and so forth. That was a big piece of it. Online, again, it was pay per click. It wasn't a lot of portals and things of that nature. And national print, a lot of people turned away from national print because of the cost and the investment. We wanted to make sure that everybody knew that our brand was relevant. That's what I'm doing with Fazoli's. So we're out in the national trades, Nation Restaurant News, QSR, Franchise Times, Franchise Multi-Unit Magazine, and so forth. I'm about out of time right now. I'll be glad to talk. But the selection process, again, is what Dave talked about it, and that takes you through that process. We never jump steps, and we never go out of order. On those steps. The only one we go out of order, I'll send a disclosure out after the intro call if I really feel good about that person. I'll go ahead and get it out. If I know they have the money, and I was taught by Robert Tunmeyer at the Dwyer Group, if I know somebody has the how-to, but they may not have the want-to yet, I'll send them the FDD. There's nothing in there. If you're registered in California, they can pull it up anyway. So you might as well just send it to them in that aspect. Thank you.
Appreciate it, James. I think one of the interesting parts that he shows is you'll notice one thing, that none of his sales came from brokers. You know, 80% of all franchises out there are non-restaurant or food franchises, and I think a lot of people think that, you know, aren't aware of that statistic. So that means that 80% of the 3,500 or so franchise, give or take, companies out there are in the service business, non-food. And a lot of them work with brokers. And we're going to talk, Dave is going to talk about that piece as the next step. So Dave, if you want to take over. And
okay, so external lead generation options. There are many. And I guess one point I'll preface this all by saying is, generally speaking, these external lead generation options don't replace your need to have an in-house function dealing with sales and recruitment. There's still going to need to be some core competency in that initially and ongoing. The 4 bullet points I have here, lead qualification services. Does anybody currently presently have a lead qualification service program or service provider that you're using? Okay, so nobody. LQSs, as they're also called. There are many. I list here 3. Go to franchise.org. There's many others. Or Google franchise lead qualification services. This is for any franchisor, in my opinion. At any price point, any investment level, and any stage of your life cycle in your brand. This isn't just relevant to an early stage franchisor or one at the entry price point levels or one at the high end. This could be relevant to any one. So LQSs are really the front end, very first touch point in a sales process that you would have. And that's just getting the basic minimum critical information to separate the wheat from the chaff so that you can hand it over to perhaps a more seasoned and more tenured sales and development person. But those LQSs can be a very efficient way to get to the masses. The second option are franchise-only brokerages, also known as lead referral networks. They've been around a long time, although there still is a lot of mystique about them. I list here 5 or 4 options. There are others as well. There's a lot of splintered groups that are out there that are perhaps in only one geography or another, but these are 4 national players. Business brokerages will also get into franchise sales, both on the initial placement as well as the resale game. The business brokerage, typically, this is not their core competency. They're mostly looking at independent resales or just resales in general. Okay. Is this a Geek Squad franchisee? The business brokerages, sometimes they let their junior people dabble in franchising. So that's a little bit of a franchisor beware that sometimes you're getting some very untrained, uninitiated broker world. The fourth option are FSOs, and Mike Pollock's going to talk more about franchise sales outsourcing organizations. Again, I list 3 here. There are others. Some develop food concepts, like Fran Smart, for example. They're only in the restaurant and hospitality game, while others are more ubiquitous. So if we go over to franchise brokers and lead referral networks, you may hear the term coach, advisor, consultant, lead referral. Those are all analogous terms. They all mean the same thing. They're interchangeable, synonymous. Some groups just may call themselves a different thing. Some may not like the B word. They don't like to be called a broker. I don't care, frankly, because I are one. But brokers are basically a lead generation source that are going to be handing off qualified leads to a franchisor. It's becoming increasingly important. It used to be, and the irony is prior to starting my company 10 years ago, when I worked at Accenture or Anderson Consulting in their retail and franchise consulting practice, one of my main messages to clients was, don't use brokers. They are the unwashed. They will get you in trouble. A lot of vicarious liability. They're not well trained. They don't know sales law. So the standards have come up. Some of it's been through CFE and some of the FranGuard, ombudsman programs, et cetera, that's basically weeded out some bad guys. But still, you have to be very careful and cautious of who you work with. Make sure you ask the right questions, and we'll get to some of those in a little bit. But here's some numbers for you. In 2000, only 11% of new units came from brokers. Now it's close to 20%. So one out of every five placements right now is coming through a broker. Some broker touched that lead that closed. 93% of all franchisors that use a broker network have made at least one placement. And it's a pay-for-performance model, meaning you really are not shelling out any retainer or any cost on the front end. So even one deal, in theory, is worth it. Not to say that that's the only reason to sign up brokers, but if 93% of them are actually making at least one deal, it may be a channel to pursue. And to be very clear, not all brokers are going to sign up all franchisors that call them. Typically, there's a couple, 3 minimum standards that they're going to look for. One is they want to see at least 10 units. That's kind of the line in the sand right now in the industry. Some will move that line front and back, but basically about 10 units. They want to see that you have a little bit of a track record and a little bit of a experiential base to draw from before signing you up. Second thing, they like to see item 19s. They like to see FPRs, something. Doesn't have to be at the net profit level, but they would like to see some numbers, some transparency in your FDD. So those are 2 questions you're going to get pretty much across the board with whomever you call. Moreover, some pros and cons. As we said, some of these brokers may be improperly trained. I know one of the first things I did, and I know Mike went through this as well, is I hired Delia Burke, who used to do the IFA's compliance program. I sent her out here and I told her to scare straight every one of my brokers. I want them to be washing behind their ears. I want them to err the side of caution. I want them to over-comply with the laws. And she did. She did a good job. We had every broker seeing kind of stars after that session, but it was one of those things where I didn't have to worry about any vicarious liability. Brokers are not dedicated to any single franchisor or any single category. So they're kind of jack of all trades, utility infielders, so to speak. They can play first base, second base, third base. So they're not going to be experts in any one industry. You're generally going to get a generalist. Now, they may also work with some of your competitors. They are not going to sign exclusivity. Typically speaking, they're not going to sole source just you, and you're going to have to weigh those pros and cons of whether or not you feel comfortable sharing any proprietary trade methods and secrets with them that could, in theory, get out. Most broker networks are not set up to target a specific geography. The pervasive, approach is that brokers work across the country. They may be domiciled in a particular location, but that's not all who they're working with. I think it's a bad strategy, but in reality, that's what a lot of brokers do. They may be talking on the phone with somebody out of Spokane, Washington, hang up the phone. They're talking with somebody in Tallahassee, Florida. Hang up the phone, they're talking to somebody in Portland, Maine, and so on. So they're really never talking